live back with our weekly CGSP Roundtable, and it's great to be with you on YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. We're doing the show a little bit early today. Usually we do them on Friday, but now we're doing it on Thursday, in part because of really the just political earthquake that took place in the United States this week with the resounding election of President-elect Donald Trump, who's going to be heading back to the White House next year. Listen, let me just channel what a lot of people on the left are thinking, and I'm joined as usual by Geronima, our Africa editor from Mauritius, and Cobus Van Staden, who looks like a prize fighter, ready to get ready for, you're going to step in the ring with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson with the hoodie on. There in Cape Town, South Africa. So let me kind of channel the collective feeling that I think a lot of people on the Democratic side are saying, and this will kind of start off our conversation here.
I'm sorry. No. Why?
Okay,
why?
so
why? Do you really hate me that bad? I'm sorry. No.
This is kind of what people, in some quarters have been feeling about what happened. I have a lot of views on it. What we're going to do today is we're going to try and go around the world and talk about how this is going to impact the U.S. China competition in Africa, Asia, South America, and other places. And these are all quick takes. We don't know. Nobody knows. We're all just trying to digest it. It is a big deal. There's no way you can avoid the fact that this isn't a big deal. So let's start with the quick takes right now. Giro, you and I got into it earlier today. You don't think that it's as big of a deal as I do. Why don't you first make your case, and then Cobus will come to you.
I do believe it's something interesting. It's something interesting, something important. We have Donald Trump coming back in presidency, as many of his supporters been saying that is the greatest comeback in political history in the U.S. It's not something notable. I was listening and reading to many of the columnists saying that they were a bit baffled with the fact that how many times, despite everything that's happened to him, but somehow he remained unscathed and always managed like a cat to fall back on to land back on his feet, and today is back in power. So for me, I do believe that as much as I see the people, the feeling that people are having, the worriness, the anxiety crippling into many people, but I do believe that I might be mistaken, but I don't believe it's a big thing. Why I don't believe it's a big thing? For one simple reason, and I think that thing that might be a bit dangerous for the future of democracy in general. And it's something I've noticed during the trip in Washington, D.C. that we had a few months back, and I also see that the way people are reacting after this election is the demonizing. When I say demonizing narrative, it's on both sides, of course. The demonizing narrative that took place during this campaign on how both sides are talking about each other in a way that if the other side wins or loses, the end of the world for us. We are done. It's over. The world is done. It's over and everything. And it's to create the sense of existential threats to us, to our humanity, to our identity, to us as a person, that for the other came to win or to lose. And this is because, and these parts of existential threats become a part of the narrative that we're seeing now, fueling the reaction that people are having now. People having the sense that, tomorrow there will be cars and policemen and trucks or whatever, people come and trying to kill me or trying to do something to me because I'm Democrat, because I'm doing something that I believe that the new president doesn't like. And this, I think it's very personal. I think it's a very dangerous stance to take for the future of democracy in general, in a sense where if we do accept that we're in democracy, that there are different views, whether we like them or not, maybe I'm going to even go far, whether they are morally questionable or not, it can be discussed and everything. But the reality is, in that regard of democracy, if your camp lose, as much as you can be bitter, as much as you can be hurt, it's going to be dangerous to perceive it as an existential threat, because you're gonna put yourself. Let me finish. Let me finish. You're gonna put yourself as a citizen in your country as someone who needs to fight an internal enemy, because otherwise if everything's going to crumble. You are not going to behave as a citizen. You're going to behave as an enemy, as yourself, without even knowing that as an enemy of the state, with that posture of like, I have to fight everything that's going to come out of this person, because this regime is literally the devil incarnated. And this mentality is dangerous for the future of democracy, not only in the US, but everywhere in the world, as I see that. And I believe that posture, I understand people's motivation, people's feelings, I understand the anxiety, but past the emotion, past the tension, I think that people really should go back to the level of like very citizens. When I say citizen, in the sense like I'm going to have, in French we say opposition républicaine, I'm going to behave as a citizen in my opposition to the ideas, and not as if I'm seeing a demon in front of me that I need to fight to end, otherwise it's dangerous to us. This is my views on that.
But you're talking as if people are saying this in opposition to Trump's, policy on agricultural exports from Idaho. You're talking as if this is a normal political rhetoric. This is a man who has said, okay, he is going to deport 20 million people. He has said he's going to throw away the Constitution. He's tweeted this. He said he's going to arrest his opponents. He said he called for the killing of journalists. I mean, like, he has broken every political norm in the United States without any political consequence, clearly. But to suggest that we should just behave normally, even though the rhetoric of what has come out of his mouth is shocking in many respects. I mean, he simulated, oral sex just last week on... while he was giving a speech. I mean, these are not things that are made up. We saw it on television. And I'm not taking a side here, but to suggest that, people are being a little bit hysterical because they don't like his ideas is really a misreading of the situation, in my view.
Two things, and it might be debatable. One thing, as I say in my first comment, in the sense of like, even if he makes comments that are morally questionable, and this is one of the arguments I say to some people, like, unless it's legally harming, unless it's something illegal, the fact is whether you like it or not, as long as it remains in the realm of the legality, there's nothing that you can do about that, because it's legal. That's the fact.
You are like the majority of Trump supporters who don't think much of this rhetoric, but calling for the, assassination of journalists and saying you're going to lock up journalists may not be illegal, but it is toxic.
That's true. That's toxic. That's reality. That toxic campaign. Yeah.
Well,
that's not the thing. That's toxic. And second point I wanted to make about that. The first point about immigration and everything, I think I didn't want to talk about it, but I believe that even that issue of immigration, I myself for immigration, I don't live in the US, but I live in different countries, and the thing is, that subject of immigration, I don't know if it's only in the US or in Europe, but it became the kind of topic where people are unable to talk about it without having that sense of emotion, where if someone says, I want to deport illegal immigrants, is definitely a bad person. And I'm not defending him, but the reaction that people are having on illegal immigration, and Kobis is from South Africa. Same thing in South Africa. If you go to South Africa and say, we're going to deport illegal immigration, people are not going to behave the same way, because people are saying, no, we are seeing what X and Y, Z are coming to do. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing this and that. So is there a space in the US where you can talk about someone says, you might have mindset to want to keep illegal immigrants, but I believe that illegal immigrants needs to be deported. Can you have that kind of conversation without demonizing each other about a subject like this, where you all agree about that, but you just don't agree about how to go about it?
Yeah,
is it possible?
We literally had a bipartisan immigration bill in the Congress that Trump undermined and wanted to make sure wasn't passed under a Biden watch. Let's get to Kobus very quickly. You wrote about this today For our subscribers, we had a special edition of our newsletter. We stopped all the regular news and we devoted the entire newsletter to your column and your first quick take thoughts on what this means specifically for Africa and other parts of the global south. Cobus, maybe just walk us through a little bit on some of the things that you articulated in that column.
I was, excuse me, I was really struck by the kind of differences in conversations that I was having between friends of mine who are in the US or who are American or are like US adjacent in some kind of way. And they are the vibe that of the YouTube or the X clip that you played is generally their vibe, right? Kind of like they are, some of them are fully despairing. They have very, I think, particularly those of them who are migrants and LGBT folks and so on, they are very worried about their own futures there, about the futures of the kids, about how America is going to be. What was interesting for me in speaking to other people like non-Americans who are in the global south, was that they are very, it was an interesting moment where one of them was literally, kind of texting me saying like, I'm so like eye roll emoji about America right now,
Yeah.
like where they are like, the main, one of the big things is like, it's like, sure, like these people want to self-immolate, they want to vote for this guy, they want to like blow up their democracy, maybe they're tired of being a liberal democracy. Why do we have to care? Like, why is it like having this outsized impact on our lives? Kind of like, why does this affect whether we can survive the climate crisis? Why does this affect what trade looks like? Why does this affect like everything else that we're living with? So with them, there's a lot more of a kind of a feeling of like, they're kind of tired of American power in some way, kind of they're tired of the daily impact that America is having on their lives. And kind of the Trump election is just a kind of a reminder of a bigger thing. And the point that I was making is, this may well be a kind of an inflection point in where the US moves from being this kind of superpower that really defines how we see reality to simply being a big, rich country.
Yeah, and by the way, it's interesting. I think the fueling is mutual from the MAGA side of the discourse. They are tired of being that pervasive omnipotent power around the world, that hegemonic power.
But they're still happy to benefit from, for example, dollar trade, right? Kind of they're still happy I would be very surprised if even the most MAGA side of the MAGA wing would be happy to give up to close the 800 military bases that the US has around the world. Like I don't think they want to give up American power.
You
they
have not
love
been
American
reading
power. They just don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, but also, I mean, one of the things that Trump has said repeatedly is he does want to bring the troops home from Germany, from Japan, from South Korea. There is a move to bring back these troops.
I wouldn't say no.
And he wanted to close AFRICOM. Remember, he wanted to close AFRICOM. This is a guy. He's not afraid. I mean, he tried to close AFRICOM, okay? And it was Congress that blocked him on that. And so
but that's what I mean, is that there's a kind of a critical mass still, I think, in Congress and even in American society that are happy with America
but remember
being
that
a global superpower.
2017 Trump is not the same as 2024 Trump. We're in a different space right now. He's not running for re-election again. He's will be there. But here's interesting, Cobus, that I was thinking as I was listening to some of the analysis this week or today about kind of why Kamala Harris lost. And there was a podcast that I shared with you, the Bulwark podcast, which I recommend, and it's very interesting. And they were saying that there's really no Democrat that could have won. That fundamentally the Democratic message was just completely out of sync with where the country is today. And it got me thinking a little bit about the conversations that we have about the U.S. role in the world and how out of sync that is as well. And I thought, if the world had to vote in this election, would they have voted for Trump or would they have voted for Biden? I have a feeling there's a lot of Jeronimas out there that probably would have given Trump the vote. And because they're tired of
you're being
this...
mischaracterized.
No. Hear me out here. No. Hear me out. And you, of all people, Cobus, are going to agree with this. The whole democracy, initiative, which the world didn't really want that. Okay. I mean, people rolled their eyes over this. The idea again of, talking about climate, and climate transition while at the same time breaking all records of fossil fuel production. Okay, while talking about human rights in Africa, but at the same time ignoring human rights in Israel, and at the same time having a different line on human rights in Ukraine. I think people are tired of all of this for decades and decades and decades, as you pointed out. And I think that the establishment foreign policy community in DC, that is a more center-left foreign policy community, is just like the Democrats. I think they're out of touch with a lot of the global norms. And I think China playing the role of Trump in many respects, and Putin playing the role of Trump, is benefiting from that enormously, that people just don't want to hear from the United States in the same way. By the way, I'll get to you. Let me just play a clip from my new vice president, which will kind of speak to this. And this was one that, by the way, made the rounds quite a bit. And I'd like to hear what you have to say.
We have built a foreign policy of hectoring and moralizing and lecturing countries that don't want anything to do with it. The Chinese have a foreign policy of building roads and bridges and feeding poor people. And I think that we should pursue a foreign policy, a diplomacy of respect, and a foreign policy that is not rooted in moralizing. It's rooted in the national interest of this country. Because Ambassador Sullivan is at the lead of moralizing instead of pursuing America's national interest, I object.
Okay, so what do you think, guys?
I mean, I'm like, I'm fine with it. Literally, seriously.
Again, you have no problem with this.
As I was telling you yesterday and this morning, coming from the global south, I'm like, guys, do you? I'm really, literally, do you? I'm happy that, that you see that it's time for you to step back a bit and to, to let countries being sovereign in the way they see their country, how it distributes to be fit, and to let region manage the issues the way they see themselves fit without you putting your grain of salt or national and security interest in it. And it reminds me one of the clip of Donald Trump was saying in the United Nations, saying that the future is not for the globalists, the future is for the patriots, those who are leading, those who want to lead their country for themselves, those interests. And I was like, yes, it's not saying something different from Xi Jinping. When Xi Jinping was saying that there is no one single way to democracy or to anything, each country is sovereign in a way to build its country. From a global South country, seeing the 60 years of U.S. influence in Central Africa and the DRC, the way things have been going. You are telling me today we want to move away, we want to take step by step. Hallelujah, do it, please. And let us struggle among ourselves, and maybe we're going to find our own way forward. And so that's what, yes, I mean, personally, from the global South, I wouldn't say no. I really wouldn't say no. And I think if you go from Southeast Asia, you say that as you said that they're thinking of closing bases. I can tell you, many people in China is going to be, yes, please close those bases. If we're going to have less of them here, maybe it's going to give us time to really talk about our own issue without having external interference on how we talk with each other.
Cobus.
I think I may be a little bit more cynical in the sense that I don't believe them really when they say that.
True.
Because I don't, kind of, because what he calls the moralizing, right, kind of like, which is essentially norm setting or attempts to norm set, is a vector of American power as much as warships are, right? So so I'd be very surprised if they give that up. What I think they will rather do is to make all kinds of deals for whoever can pay, and then couch those as norm setting. So I don't think I don't think there's any sincere wish to withdraw American power from the world. I think what there is more is a wish to deploy it differently, maybe, but to profit from it, kind of more, kind of in new ways. So I'd be very surprised if any base gets closed. I'd be extremely surprised if any base gets closed.
They're going to pick and choose, I believe.
Yeah, but
they're going to pick
again,
and
but
choose.
he's talking about
I'd be very
moralizing.
surprised if they-
Forget about
No.
bases, but he was talking about moralizing. I don't think you're going to see the LGBT rainbow flag flying over the U.S. Embassy in Accra anymore.
No,
I don't
but
think you're going
certain-
to see human rights being a center of discussion.
No,
you
but
know.
I am willing to bet that someone at some stage will get sanctions against him for persecuting Christians, for example.
Yeah.
So the topics will change, the themes will
It'll
change,
be
the optics
their
will change,
topics.
but the power won't change.
Okay. Let's turn the conversation to China and how this affects China in different parts of the world. You guys are both in Africa. We'll come over to here in Asia a little bit later. One of the things that was the hallmark of the Trump administration, specifically in Africa, was, remember, this is you live in apparently S-hole countries. He tried to close AFRICOM. He never visited the continent. It's not a place that he thinks of very highly. It's not a place that is high on the MAGA foreign policy priority. Only in the context it did come up in Project 2025 was in the context of confronting China. So Mike Pompeo is the former Secretary of State, made it a habit every time he went to China when he was representing Donald Trump. When he went to Africa when he was representing Donald Trump. And the word China came out of his mouth almost every time. China. So when we look at the incoming President Trump administration, the president-elect and his new foreign policy team, he is going to probably be more hawkish on China. And that will probably come up again in Africa. Cobus, you are also sitting in a country that is going to be firmly in the crosshairs of the GOP Senate, potentially the Congress, and certainly parts of the MAGA base because of the positions that South Africa's taken on Gaza, the positions that South Africa's taken on Taiwan. And how does this play in the bigger China dynamic? Does China benefit from this in Africa, from the U.S. kind of losing interest? Or or what? Cobus, let's start with you, then Jill will come to you.
Overall, I think the big picture, I think, is that the US will lose interest in Africa, even more than they already have. Because I mean,
And you're
under
okay
Biden-
with that, by the way, right?
Well, it depends. It depends on the
Oh,
issue.
Jill is very okay with that.
Oh yeah.
But in general, I think. Yeah, I think in lots of ways, being ignored by the United States is probably the best thing Africa can hope for. I think in some cases, South Africa, I think, will be performatively targeted. They'll be blamed, they'll probably cite Taiwan and Russia, but kind of in reality, it'll be punishment for calling out the genocide in Israel. Because if there's one thing that the election
Genocide
showed
in Gaza,
is that
by the way.
Genocide in Gaza, is that that particular kind of set of war crimes enjoys very firm bipartisan support in the US. That's the one thing that the election showed. So I think if South Africa does get targeted, for example, if South Africa is kicked out of AGOA, for example, which I think is still up for debate. I don't know that would necessarily happen, but simply because there are corporate interests in the US that would probably fight against that. But if they are, then I think it will just conclusively push them towards China. I think that could be a slightly trickier for the US than anticipated, simply because one shouldn't forget that South Africa remains a very key shipping point. If there are, as we saw if shipping through the Red Sea gets interrupted, then going around the Cape of Good Hope is the other option. And a China-centric South Africa could complicate that. I think some other countries or regions, issues that have a lot of lobbying support, will get attention. So Somaliland will probably get attention because we know that the Heritage Foundation basically camps out there. But what I fear is that this will make Somaliland into the new South Sudan. I think it's very.
You have to explain
there's
what
real
that
danger
means.
for that.
In 20 seconds, just briefly explain what that means, because I think not everybody's clear.
South Sudanese secession was very heavily supported by the Republican Party, and it was campaigned for during the Bush era. They did secede in the end, and almost immediately fell into a civil war, which has never ended. So I think like Somaliland is in real danger of following that same path. Overall, I think the PGI African initiatives like the Lobito corridor. I'm not sure. I don't have the confidence at the moment to be like Lobito's dead, but I think it'll face some challenges. I think
maybe, but let's not forget that it was the Trump administration that took OPIC into DFC. OPIC was the precursor to the Development Finance Corporation, and it was the Trump administration that put through $60 billion for the DFC. So it's entirely possible that if they frame this as slap China across the face, challenge the BRI, this thing could survive. Maybe not in the form that it is now, which was all about green and green hydrogen business and all of that will probably go away. But maybe as a logistics corridor to get stuff out of Giro's country into ports, that might actually work. Giraud, what do you think?
Because that's the only frame through which Africa is seen, right? It's extraction.
Correct.
Exactly. Plus the national security agenda into it. So for me, few things here. I believe that Africa will fall off the agenda in a sense where there won't be much of priority from the White House itself about Africa. He's shown that interest. There's no really big interest for him, personal interest to have a personal views on what should be happening in Africa, which means that we're gonna have a lot of individual or diplomatic African experts within the administration who might be key into shaping U.S. foreign policy in Africa, which also means that we won't have the whole Africa being interesting to the Trump administration. We're only going to have few specific countries that are going to matter overall. Countries like the South Africa, the Somaliland that you mentioned, the DRC, the Angola to a certain extent, and the Maghreb country to a certain extent as well. So the overall Africa will fall off the priority list, which was never there anyway. But the danger that I see in now having individual running African policy and not having the White House having a personal interest is the fact that we may find ourselves with a huge mess where individual interests working either for lobbies or working in conjunction with certain lobbies will start pushing certain agenda that might be hurtful for those specific countries. And at this point, countries that are not into the radar, they might be even well off than countries that are in the radars of those specific countries. I'm going to take an example like the South Africa with the AGOA debate. When you have few people who hate China, who find themselves that I'm going to make it a point that South Africa needs to pay for what it did for Israel and the Gaza and Ukraine and China and Russia, they're going to make South Africa life a living hell. And you won't have someone in the White House really paying attention to what's happening there because, anyway, we don't care about that. Same thing with the DRC. We had in DC, we know our old friend, Mr. Peter Pham, who's been really tremendous talking about the Lobito corridor.
By the way, Peter Pham is a former Trump administration diplomat. This is a guy who wakes up every morning, looks himself in the mirror and says, "Good morning, Mr. Assistant Secretary. How are you today?"
Exactly.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, Peter Pham is in.
He's definitely very excited right now. So.
Exactly. We're going to have the likes of Peter Pham coming because what we don't know about the Lobito corridor, we have a company called Africell in which you have Peter Pham sitting on the board of that company, a non-executive board. So you're going to have individuals like him starting to shape the agenda of specific countries. And you may find ourselves with countries that's where if there is a mess, you literally have no one in DC except the assistant secretary or the person in charge in the White House dealing with that situation. And this is where, for me, it could be dangerous for those specific countries. If there is a full disengagement from Africa, it should happen on a larger scale of the administration. If they just leave it to specific individual based on the Africa interest into shaping U.S. foreign policy, we might find ourselves with a lot of mess. Just like Kobe mentioned, we're going to find ourselves with another South Sudan situation happening again.
So just in case folks at home are not familiar with Peter Pham, here is his Twitter page or X page. And in many ways, when he's been
Anti-China.
out of oh, he's very anti-China. I mean, he's
China.
on the MAGA when it comes to China. But in many ways, I mean, there he is. He is ready to go. But it's interesting. He's, through his X feed, he's kind of telegraphing his views, and China's come up quite a bit, you'll see. But also, in many ways, during the time that Trump was out of office, he has served in some ways as a shadow minister. I mean, African leaders come to the U.S., Chesekedi, you name it. And you go through his Twitter feed and they look up Peter Pham. I mean, I haven't figured it out because I've asked a lot of people in DC. I said, what is the draw? Why are these guys going to Peter Pham? And yet they are. It's really quite remarkable. He has a really very strong pull in Washington with African leaders. He is really quite so. This is a guy you want to keep an eye on for, again, I think
the future of Africa.
He probably wants assistant secretary. Who knows? But he has been a loyal Trump supporter, and Trump values loyalty above all else. Okay, so when we talk about the U.S. and, again, the instability, one of the things that the Chinese are going to talk about is, again, one of the messages that came out of FOCAC was more access to the Chinese market for African products. They reduced tariffs on African goods. There's still quite a few non-market barriers to entry for African products, photosanitary, hygiene standards for products and things for agricultural products. But tariff-wise, they've come down. There is going to be a narrative battle that says, look at those jokers in the U.S., they're going to put tariffs up very, very high, and look at us, we've got no tariffs. That potentially could be a very compelling argument to make for African countries looking to expand exports to drive employment. Cobus?
Yeah, I think so.
But China doesn't buy much, by the way, from Africa.
Exactly.
Let's be very clear. 89% of exports from Africa are extractive. So they can talk this great game about low tariffs, but at the end of the day, they don't really buy that much.
Yes, and a lot of African countries are not even set up to be able to make use of these, of this, lifting of tariffs. So it's a little bit of an academic, issue in some respects. For me, the biggest story around the tariffs, I think, is the flow in the opposite direction. Is flows from China into Africa and from China into the rest of the global South. As the US and Europe really go for tariffs, and I mean, Trump loves the tariff, of course, and and he was talking about 2,000% tariffs on stuff like earlier this week, and it was so as that happens, like I think there is a stronger kind of pivot to the global South, with all of these kind of products coming out of China, so that I think could potentially be in some ways even more transformative, simply because it's like we talk, when we talk about trade, we tend to leave out the impact that a lack of infrastructure has on African trade, and so in that sense, just like huge amounts of solar panels, for example, flowing out of China at easier rates because they blocked everywhere else where they could charge higher prices, kind of potentially has that kind of larger impact that could kickstart some kind of like bigger issues within Africa.
Yeah. Let's shift attention because we don't want to go on for too long and focus only on Africa. Let's also kind of turn the globe and spin it all the way over here in Asia. And Cobus, you'll recall maybe this was on July 18th. I wrote this article. Let me just bring this up for you. And I feel like if Trump wins, the Philippines better have a good backup plan. And
I was thinking of that article.
I am more convinced than ever that when we look at the winners and the losers out here, the Philippines and Taiwan are definitely on the losing side. Some of the analysis coming out on the Democrat and the left in the U.S. says, Ukraine, I'm sorry, you're on your own now. This is not a political fight that the Democrats are going to wage in the United States. Trump wants to cut funding for Ukraine. It's over. the concern among national security hawks, particularly those like Elbridge Colby and Matt Pottinger, is that will send a message to Xi Jinping that he will basically be able to move on South China Sea expansion and also on Taiwan. And so the question here is that, Trump twice this year in interviews with Marita Bartiromo on Fox Business News and elsewhere, and also with Bloomberg, has said that Taiwan is not his priority, and from that I deduct that he's not going to go to war with Xi Jinping over rocks in the South China Sea. I just don't see that. And interestingly, Cobus, in his acceptance speech this week, he said he's going to stop wars. He's not going to start wars. He made that point. Another indication that if China crosses certain lines, even killing Filipino sailors in the South China Sea, and activates Article 5 of the 1951 Security Treaty, 51 or 52 Mutual Security Treaty, it doesn't necessarily prescribe the level of engagement that the U.S. provides. Okay? It just says we'll come to the defense. So that could be, okay, here's a box of bullets, now go do something. Or it could be a full intervention of the fleet. We don't know. Same for Taiwan. And so, but here we are in Asia, in a very, hot neighborhood when it comes to tensions right now. And the United States has changed the chessboard right away. Giraud, your take.
There's one question, though, that's quite important. I think we should, first of all, I think that we can agree that Trump likes U.S. power. He likes U.S. to be powerful, to be a stable and powerful country. So the second question becomes then, how does he going to disengage in those spaces without making the U.S. look weak? Because he doesn't want the U.S. to look weak or in any way.
That is a question of perception, though, because what he thinks makes people look weak, others do not, and vice versa. So that's perception.
So that element of perception matters, because in international politics, perception matters, because that's what we mentioned, the fact that if he pulls out from Ukraine, or if he stopped the support in Ukraine, he stopped protecting even Taiwan or Philippines, it may be perceived from China that is a signal that they can move further. Same for Russia, they can move further. So everything is a matter of perception. So perception really matters a lot in this debate. So the question is going to become, how is going to manage all those crises without, first of all, making the U.S. look weak and look bad, look weak in so many ways. For Taiwan, for instance, I think that if the establishment gets to shape the question from the national security perspective, because of the chips, because of how they're useful to weapon industry, to all the manufacturing industry and everything, I think it's still find a way to protect Taiwan. But I don't think it might be to the extent that Taiwanese are expecting now. They're waiting for now. So now the question is transactional mindsets, of course, might be putting in danger a country like the Philippines and China, because China may now say, okay, let's break a deal into how we're going to manage this so we can move forward. I was watching the French news yesterday when they were talking about Ukraine. They mentioned the fact that after Volovinsky really got on the bad side of Trump during his trip in the US, now he's trying to appeal to Trump transactional mindset by putting forward that Ukraine is rich in natural resources, Ukraine has this and that, there is an opportunity for market, there's opportunity for businesses, for reconstruction. So appealing to the man from his business perspective might be the way to move forward. So countries like Philippines and Taiwan, in the case of where you have a much bigger player who can strike a bargain with Trump on that, they might be in a very difficult position, because their bargaining power compared to China is close to none with the US.
I was back in Taiwan a couple of weeks ago, and I had a chance to talk with people and wrote this letter that I shared with our subscribers. I highly recommend you go take a look at it. It is a surreal place to be, because the week that I was there was the first time ever that the People's Liberation Army, and again, this was joint forces, Coast Guard, Air Force, they surrounded the island for the first time. And yet on the streets of Taipei, asking just the everyday guy, I said, aren't you worried at all? I mean, at all? And they're like, nah, no.
Uncle Sam is there.
You know, they said the Americans, if anything happens, will be there. And this is crazy. I mean, crazy if they're kind of investing all of their faith that we're going to come to their aid. And it's just that. And again, it's surreal. That's why I wrote that this is a surreal, because there's very few other places in the world that, you know, face that existential threat the way that Taiwan does. And yet their defense budget is less than Singapore's. And we're talking like 2.2, 2.3% of GDP. And it's just, I find it very unusual that there's a certain fatalism that's there. But, you know, I mean, in Cobus, you know, back in the day, during the apartheid era, remember that Taiwan, South Africa, and Israel had this special bond of being small places surrounded by very hostile majority population. So South Africa was the small white apartheid government surrounded by a hostile black population, Taiwan surrounded by China or confronting China, and then Israel confronting the Arab rivals that it had around it. And that was a diplomatic bond among them. Certainly not the case today as much anymore at all. But so the question here in Asia that I think is on a lot of people's minds is the United States going to articulate its level of commitment to defend? We've heard out of Japan, Jiho, that already in Japan, they are expressing, the top senior foreign policy advisor said, F this, we're on our own. We're going to start going our own way. And I remember, Cobus, when I was in graduate school at the University of Hong Kong, and I had a bunch of Chinese classmates who said, we want the U.S. out of Asia. That's the goal. And I said to him, okay, you talk to Americans, they would love to pull the troops back. They would. They don't want to pay for this. They don't want to be there. And you look, Trump articulates this. But are you ready now for a nuclear Japan with nuclear weapons? They are not going to sit exposed to North Korea and China without nuclear weapons if they're on their own. South Korea will not sit facing North Korea and China without nuclear weapons. That will spark a massive arms race of potentially uncontrollable proportions. I'm not being hysterical here. The Japanese have made it clear that they are not going to be exposed to that kind of vulnerability. And then seeing a Japanese military rearm, and you know that Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution is a defense-oriented constitution, but they can switch that to an offensive should they choose to, and if they feel threatened enough.
They're working to do that already.
They are working to do it. That's right. And if the United States pulls out, they're not going to sit there and be vulnerable to it. So the unpredictability of what the United States is going to do is probably going to create a lot of anxiety in this part of the world, already amping up the stress and tension that's here already. What's your thought, Cobus?
Well, broadly, I think that this is becoming a theme across the global South. You know, where there's a lot of discussion. I've heard this in Africa as well, among kind of African officials, like increasingly talking about de-risking their relationship with the United States, because the US is unpredictable, because you never know which US you're getting. So I think that's going to be true elsewhere. I think on the Philippines, is really out on a limb, because they really committed themselves, they really fully threw themselves into this coalition building, but they have a geography problem, right? Kind of like China isn't going away; they're sitting on China's doorstep forever. So I think that in the medium term, I think the Vietnam option is going to become a lot more attractive for these countries, which is basically try and be as independent as you can while keeping everyone as close as you can. And therefore kind of not fully commit yourself to anyone, because I think we're now seeing the downside on the Philippine side of fully committing yourself to, to someone, and particularly becoming the emblem of a larger U.S. China dispute. I think that is dangerous territory to be in, and this is kind of partly what I was thinking of when I was saying that in the African side, that kind of in some ways being ignored by the US is the best thing you can hope for, because the moment there's a lot of attention, US attention on you, even if that is supposed to be helping you, it still tends to increase heat, kind of like in wherever you are.
Yeah, Jero, go ahead.
But for Japan, it will take more than 4 years to develop nuclear weapon. So by then 4 years, Trump will be gone. Maybe we may have another Trump is coming in power. Maybe we have Democrats coming back. But it's gonna take more than 4 years for a country like Japan to rearm themselves to the point to become a threat to the region or to become a threat to other countries. And I think that there is enough time. And this is why I put all those big issues in perspective, because it's only might say it's only 4 years, and it's take a long time to change the balance of power when it comes to military power. When it comes to so many things, it take a long time. Even closing bases, you don't close base in 1 month, in 3 months. It's gonna take you time to do that. So by the time you really finish off to say I'm gonna close everything, 4 years will be done, and who knows what's going to happen? Things will go back to the way people want to go back.
We're running out of time, but I do want to get to India very quickly, because this is very interesting, the timing of all of this. So Modi and Trump definitely have a strong relationship. I'm not going to go as far as to call it a special relationship, but it is a strong relationship. Modi was one of the first leaders to post congratulations to Trump. He was one of the first leaders to call Trump, and Trump speaks very highly of Modi. Now, this comes at a time when the question of the Quad becomes, does it remain viable if the United States doesn't like these kinds of multilateral security arrangements? Trump has already said he wants to get out of NATO, and so he might look at these agreements like Quad with a little bit of skepticism. And it also comes at the same time when Modi and Xi Jinping have started to kind of make nice after 4 years, and there's been this disengagement from the very tense border. Modi and the Indians are part of the BRICS. They're part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They're enthusiastic members of the BRICS. This is a very complicated situation now with the change of government in the United States. Cobus, how do you think India plays in all of this?
I think they do more of what they're already doing, which is to play all sides. I expect them to try and be as close to the US as they can. They will also remain very close to Russia, as we know. The Modi's bear hug with Putin recently.
The hug,
and they however they manage the situation with China, I think they will in some kind of way try and kind of position themselves strategically in there too. Overall, I think the idea that India is an uncomplicated member of a US coalition was always a Biden era fantasy. I think it was never realistic. It didn't take into account the full complexity of Indian foreign policy, I think. But I think what would be interesting is what a post-Modi India is going to look like, because this is his final term. Whether he set a template for this kind of like strongman politics that will be followed on, in the next term, or whether there's a reaction from Indians themselves. I think that like Indian democracy is so complex that it's very difficult to predict.
Okay.
Yeah,
Jérôme, your thoughts?
I think that those organizations may take, and if they're not dismantled, and which I don't think is going to happen, but they may take a much more defensive approach now. We may see a de-escalation instead of an expansion of different policies and different tools or different engagement that may signal a much offensive position. And I do believe that instead of going to that to those organizations and say, we're gonna dismantle this, we're gonna disband this, we're gonna disband this, it's going to be okay. We're gonna just reduce our engagement. We're just gonna cut off in any kind of form that's going to signal expansion. We're gonna remain and keep the status quo, and those where we can disengage, we're going to disengage. But I do believe that at the end, country like India is going to have to, just like Philippines, going to have to make the game to get the cards in the road to understand where they're going, how they're going to approach all of that, and how they're going to approach a Trump situation. Because the reality is they can also say that, as I said earlier, it's only 4 years. We can just close our eyes, hold our tongue, hold the fort for 4 years and see what's going to happen. Because now it's now a matter of perception, it's a matter of a projection. What could happen in 4 years? In 4 years, do we see China wanting to get much more offensive on Philippines, on India, on Taiwan? Yes, no. In 4 years, do we see, given China current economic situation, do we see them really going into a military operation where things can get ugly and much more difficult and much more complex for the CCP in terms of governance? Or not. So all of those elements are in the table, and each country is going to look at them and say, maybe we may not need to worry now. We may just take step by step and see how things are going to move. Personally, I do believe that as long as China's economic situation is the way it is now, we shouldn't be expecting a major military escalation to the brink of war with countries like India or with Taiwan or even Philippines. We might have some things here and there, but full war, I don't see that happening.
Okay, Giraud, you are going. Okay, I was going to give Giraud the last word, but Cobus, you're going to get the last word now.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the big issue, like just the I guess the assumption that that underlies what Giraud was saying was that the U.S. will keep functioning the way that we know it to function,
That's
right? Kind of,
That's
and,
right.
and I think that
the
it's a
assumption.
very
That's
radical moment within the United States at the moment. Project 2025 wants to throw a lot of stuff out the window,
Yeah.
and wants to change a lot of very fundamental things in the U.S. So one of the things that could fundamentally change is how U.S. democracy itself works. And so there I think we are at this really kind of like unique inflection point, more than any kind of normal U.S. election, I think.
I'm with you, Cobus, but we will see 4 years from now. Giraud is the optimist
Yeah.
here. Didn't think
I
that
believe
Giraud would be
no,
the
no, no.
Trumper of the group. That wasn't on my
No,
bingo card.
I really do believe that there are institutions. Not when I say institution, not the formal one. There is a way and set of living that's ingrained in every society. That's especially in a country like the US, where it's gonna take years to dismantle by a 4 years term president who even wants to change everything. Even within the MAGA, even within the Republican Party, there are people who likes the way they live in the US, that even if Trump wants to dismantle them, they're gonna be the people who are going to block processes, reforms here and there, because whether we like it or not, many Americans love the way they love their countries.
No.
Republicans
But
or
Giraud,
not.
again, to Cobus's point, if you look at what they are saying, this is them saying it. They want to cut 20 to 30% of the bureaucracy of the federal government. They want to close the Department of Education. They want to take entire sections of the government and get rid of it. The system was never designed to be attacked like this from within. It has no defenses against it. So again, I think you are supposing that this is just another normal administration. That is not what they are saying with their own words, that this is what they want to do. And so again, to Cobus's point, you're making the assumption that this is going to be a regular functioning American government. Trump says they don't want to do that. J.D. Vance says he doesn't want to do that. Project 2025 articulates that. They have written and said everything. So let's see.
They're going to be a change. They're going to be changed,
and they have
but
no
to the
check
point
on
of
their power, by the way.
Yeah,
Because
they're going to be
They're going to go
changes.
after
Yeah,
the deep
true.
state. They're going to make everybody sign loyalty tests. They've got the Senate. They might get the House. They've got the Supreme Court. They didn't have that in 2017. So that is something very, very different. This is an amazing amount of power that the White House has, and specifically Donald Trump has. So we will see how he exercises it. I take the point of view that it's going to be transformative, and I kind of come down more on that the world will not be the same after this. Not
The first
necessarily
100
for worse
the first
necessarily,
100
but
days
the
will
world
tell
is
us.
different. So
Yeah.
he says he's going to do a lot on the first day. I mean, let's see.
Yeah.
So
Let's see.
We'll see. So we'll continue to do this. I want to bring everybody's attention to what Cobus did today. This is the column. It's on our homepage. Trump, China, and the rest of us.
The rest of us.
This is fantastic. This is the quick
It
take.
sounds like a Netflix show title.
It is. It really is, Trump and the rest of us. But there are, and in Cobus, I'm going to flatter you in front of you, but there's no one else who writes like this. Really, there is genuinely, these takes that Cobus has are phenomenal. They're only available to our subscribers, and so we would be thrilled if you guys supported the work that we're doing as independent journalists, and we're trying to bring these kinds of discussions, and it requires your support. It's hard as an independent media company. It's hard as a company covering China, where we get accused in these Twitter and in these YouTube comments on the same day. They come after me. They don't come after you guys. They come after me and they say, I'm CIA. And then in the same Twitter thread, they'll say I'm CCP. And you're like,
you don't win. You don't
how
win.
can you be both in the same day? I mean, go figure. But by the way, for the record, neither CIA nor CCP. Just want to make that very clear.
Exactly.
Despite the accusations that we get, but I guess that's a compliment, people would say, if you're getting accused from both sides. So, but we do appreciate everybody's support to help make this happen. We have a Patreon community. All of that is in our about pages on our websites and also on YouTube. So, gentlemen, thank you again for another roundtable. I'm going to be heading out to California over the weekend, so our next roundtable will probably be from the U.S., where I'll be able to give you an update on what's happening from the homeland. It's going to be
especially in California.
Especially in California.
Shrieking in Berkeley.
Oh, the tears are going to be just everywhere. The mascara is going to be running. The vegan mascara will be running down everywhere. So
I'm just reading a few comments here. Just really funny.
Yes,
people
they think I'm a double agent, a triple agent. Does that mean if you're a triple agent, you get paid 3 times? Because I would take that compared to the salary we're getting
so
here.
it's really funny. It's really funny.
It's wonderful. And I think after 15 years of doing this and literally been reporting for 35, 40 years, my cover would be blown. But here we are. So that's it. So guys, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Nice way to end the week. Really great discussions. And I have a feeling, Giraud, this is not over. So
this is not over. This is definitely not over. We are heading toward very exciting time for foreign policy in the world. That's going to be really defining. I think that's the moment. Whether things stay the way they are, whether they change, we are really heading toward very interesting time for expert academics, analysts, and everything. It's really very exciting.
And Cannon Fodder 43. If Eric was taking money, it is not showing up in the budget, and you can see. This is about as low budget as you get. That is exactly it, man. Oof, God. It's just one of these things where it's like you see these people getting suitcases full of cash, and you're like, definitely not happening here. I'll tell you that right now. So thank you, everybody. We will see you next week when I'm in California. Bye for now.